Happy, happy Halloween, Halloween, Halloween. We love a Bob the Builder moment. Hello everyone in this YouTube world. Today I'm going to be talking about a movie that has a lot of people divided, and that is Halloween Ends. I feel like after a few days of just letting the movie sit on me, I'm ready to talk about it, even though I still have no idea how I really feel about this movie. There are so many things in this film that I love, but there's also a couple of things that I'm not exactly the biggest fan of. I respect a lot of the decisions they made with this movie, but I felt like there was some sort of element missing from this film. It's not just the lack of Michael Myers. I think that there were definitely some missed opportunities with certain moments with certain characters. Felt like there was just a lot that I missed in the film that I felt like should have been there. I will be talking about specific plot points, so this is a spoiler alert for Halloween Ends. The opening of the film is probably the most jarring opening we have seen so far. It had my mouth to the floor with how it was executed. I thought it was such a strong opening for this movie. I really love that foreboding feeling we get before this incident actually takes place. This is the moment in Corey's life that completely shifted his course. Like, he will not be the same after this one event, and we really get to see that fleshed out in the entirety of this film, for better or for worse, depending on how you look at it. And I know that is where moviegoers are really split with this film. This is the final film of a 4-film timeline in this franchise, and we are just getting introduced to this Corey character. And it's not like Corey is a side character. No, the majority of Halloween Ends follows his character. Jamie Lee Curtis is extremely fun in this movie. I really like how we got to see this other lens of Laurie Strode. We could really see how she's starting to process everything and moving on with her life. And I really love how we had the aspect of her writing her own memoir. Andi Matichak really brought a lot to Allison's character in this film. I really feel like we got to understand her more as a person, but I will go on to argue that some of her character motivations just feel a little bit off in this movie, especially once we get to the plot line of her and Corey's love story. And I figured she would be more skeptical of getting into a new relationship, considering of what she went through in the other 2 films in this trilogy. We see her doing somewhat well in this career. I mean, she's working at a Haddonfield Memorial Hospital, like express emergency room. So we know that she is at least doing something with her life. I'm really back and forth if I like the love story plot, because it takes up so much runtime in this movie. It got to the point where there was a moment in the film, I thought in my head, it was kind of where we were just right there divided in the middle, and it was kind of where I was like, are we gonna get over this? When are we gonna essentially get to the point where, okay, Michael is on the loose, we don't really care about this Allison and Corey love triangle because we know that this is just inevitably going to doom. So the more time we spend on it, the more time I feel like I'm wasting. That's kind of where I felt more towards the middle of the movie. I do love the commentary of Haddonfield in this movie, the community aspect of forming Corey into this sort of boogeyman-like character. I really like that aspect because it's kind of similar in tone to the themes we saw in 2018 and Halloween Kills. I think that really solidifies kind of the whole metaphor and the point of these 3 movies. However, there's a lot more I felt like that could have been done to execute this as a better final film in this trilogy. And I'm not saying that essentially this love story plot is a bad thing, but we are focusing more on this at the downside of missing out on finality that honestly everyone just wants to see in this movie. And for example, I thought we would see more of Frank. I thought we were going to see more of Sheriff Barker, Julian, the lady who surprisingly survived in Halloween Kills. Interesting how we got to see the damage of Michael's attack on a person. It's horrifying in itself, and it just leaves with an unnerving feeling. You can feel that sort of foreboding feeling of the shape throughout the film, and that is even just prevalent in the opening scene where Corey's looking at the camera with the parents of the child he is babysitting, and they just look at the camera and they're smiling. Oh, we're gonna have a good time tonight. There's a beat. That set the tone for a lot of this movie, and I really like that. What was the point of Lindsay Wallace in this movie? And that's not to bash Kyle Richards. I just felt like if we're bringing a character that is both from the 1978 film and Halloween Kills back into this final film, I figured she would have an arc of her own with Michael or even this Corey character. Instead, she's kind of just kicked to the side and doesn't really have anything to do with the main plot except for maybe commenting on a scene or two. I was assured that we would see another matchup between Lindsay and Michael Myers in some sort of aspect based on what we saw in the previous movie. She had a pretty intense confrontation with Michael Myers in Halloween Kills, so I was kind of waiting for a more intense and more brutal matchup with them in Ends, and we never got that. And in fact, I was expecting matchups with Frank, Sheriff Barker, because I feel like he needed a character redemption or more so a bigger, grander sort of gesture. And I felt like Officer Barker should have played a lot bigger of a role in this last film than he did. A big one with Allison, especially once we get to the final act of the movie. Her just placement in this film just really doesn't sit well with me because she was essentially the new Laurie Strode. We really care about her story and what she's going through because she lost so much, but the way they put her into this love story and then they don't really give her this final big moment with Michael. Yeah, she does something to him, but she doesn't really have anything to deal with the final act of the movie. And that's really disheartening to me considering we've covered her throughout these 3 films. I really love the Halloween 3 Season of the Witch aspects of this movie. The main title sequence with all the fonts and the colors, I felt like it really just honed in on certain vibes and feelings that were prevalent in films that came out in the 80s. It really does feel like a earlier John Carpenter film. The films are just all shot amazingly well. The score is beautifully done by John Carpenter and his team. We have the same team returning that's being helmed by David Gordon Green, the director. And we also get to see more of Jamie Lee Curtis and Michael Myers going at it. And even though this film doesn't dedicate a lot of its screen time to Michael Myers, I really love the whole aspect of bringing elements from the 1980s into present day. Once we get to Michael's big comeback moment, I dig the fact that Michael rejuvenates whenever he kills because that just goes on to prove a point that Laurie made at the end of Halloween Kills by saying the more he kills, the more he transcends. And we actually get to see that. I really like that plot element because it really strings together kills and ends perfectly in that aspect. However, what doesn't make sense is when Corey looks into Michael's eyes and all of a sudden he's now essentially the evil that's been inside of Michael this entire time. That's when we're introducing lore and all of this into a final film of a bunch of other stuff that we've been kind of trying to go with to this point because they did take risks with the other films, but I feel like this was the one they took the most risk on. I don't think it works for a Halloween movie. It should have just been explained that Corey was just so obsessed with Michael that it consumed him. His obsession with the shape actually made him turn into something darker. And I really like the aspect of the fact that the town of Haddonfield sort of invented both Michael and Corey as these villains in the town. A lot of people have issues with Corey wearing the whole mask and jumpsuit. I actually really love that aspect of the movie. I didn't have a problem with it. We finally get to where Corey essentially starts getting more off the rails. And it's really interesting to see him sort of go back and forth with Allison and, you know, being with Michael and doing his thing. I would be okay with the love story if we had a satisfying conclusion with it, but we didn't. We've spent probably an hours worth of runtime just on. And that really just annoys me with this movie. It was a lot of filler for a movie we're expecting all of these loose ends to get tied up. Controversial opinion, Karen should have survived Halloween Kills and then get killed off in Halloween Ends. I feel like the dynamic between Karen and Allison would have been so interesting with the Corey character in this movie, more so than what it would be with Laurie's character, because we're seeing Laurie move on. And I think it would be really interesting if we saw more Karen and Allison's lens looking at Corey as the shape. I don't understand why Frank was kept alive in 2018 and Halloween Kills just for him to be a sidelined love interest for Laurie Strode in this movie. I really was expecting him to have that sort of moment with Michael Myers. I had it in my bingo card before I went into this movie. I honestly thought Frank was going to die. I thought Lindsay Wallace was going to die. I knew there wasn't going to be that many kills, but I was expecting the kills to have a lot of prominence and a lot of big moments. Like whenever you have the title Halloween Ends with like all of this build up and setup from the previous two movies, you expect that. They had everyone to do the movie that I think everyone was sort of expecting. Now, granted, I do respect the fact that they did something different and they didn't exceed expectations, but you reeled us in for two movies and you promised us a trilogy and you brought back all of these characters just to do nothing with them. That's kind of where it gets annoying with me. We don't have any sort of resolution with their character arcs. I feel like the more I let it sit on me, and also a marathon with Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, and Halloween Ends, I would have a more positive opinion of the movie. Unfortunately, right now my opinion is more negative because I don't view it as a great Halloween film, but I do see it as a pretty decent movie if you look at it on a film standpoint. I saw Halloween Ends in the movie theater with a group of friends, and it's just so much fun seeing it in theaters. I really feel like that was the way I was supposed to watch this movie. Now, granted, we'll see how my opinion evolves over time. Okay, so now let's talk about when we get near the final act. What played out was good, but it didn't hit all the bases I thought it would. I wanted to note this. I don't know why, but the scarecrow mask that Corey wore kind of in the middle of this movie reminded me a lot of the young Michael Myers clown mask from Rob Zombie's 2007 remake. I just felt like they had a similar sort of shape and vibe to them, and this is why I really liked the aspect of Corey becoming the shape. There's a moment where he's wearing the scarecrow mask and he's standing there still. You have no idea what's behind that mask at that given moment, and that invoked such a fear in me. I don't know about you, Allison. His banana ain't worth it. Anyways, I really love the sequence at Dr. Mathis's house. I really like the whole Corey being on the poolside and not really assisting Michael, but essentially setting a cage up for Michael to go in to get the next victim. We get homages to the original film, but also we had this new energy. But I do have to say, when Corey tackles Michael Myers to get the mask, that took me out. And as odd as it sounds, I liked the moments where Corey was wearing the mask. I think it was just an interesting approach to the Michael Myers story. And now we're at the point right before the final moments of this film that everyone's been waiting to see. It's when Corey fully takes on the mantle of the shape, and he's now loose in Haddonfield. He kills a bunch of teenagers that have been sort of picking on him and teasing him this entire movie. And I really thought that sequence was done really well. I felt like the junkyard was one of the moments in this film that really makes it shine as a good movie, because just the effects that they went through and just how brutal it was. It was a lot to handle in the moment. It really played on similar beats and tropes that this trilogy is known for, and I really appreciated that. I felt like there should have been more done in the house that we saw in the opening scene, instead of it just being in the beginning and at a moment where I don't even know if it actually happened or if it was just in Corey's head. It was whenever he had that conversation with Lori in the house. I'm not saying that I didn't like the final act in Lori's house, but I wish it was inside of that bigger mansion. Now we're in the final act. I'm upset because we get into the beginning of the climax, essentially just rips away the entire plot we've seen for the last hour plus. It's interesting because there's a moment that plays out in this film that mirrors a deleted scene in the 2018 film, and I'm kind of curious as to why they deleted that scene in the 2018 film, if they were going to kind of play a similar beat on that in Halloween Ends. And I'm not going to go into details because it is triggering, but let's just say Lori got to a certain point in Halloween 2018 where she was in not a great headspace. That mindset was sort of replayed, but as sort of a pawn against Corey so that Lori will get the upper hand. Thought that was a really interesting plot point. So then we have that moment where Lori and Corey kind of just go back and forth, and then Lori is just kind of like, well, if you want to kill me, then just do it. Corey does what Corey does, and then we get to my least favorite moment in this film. It's when Allison walks into Lori's house and she sees Lori take the knife out of Corey. Do you not see the mask on the floor? Do you not see him in a jumpsuit? Do you not see that there was possibly some distress here right before this moment happened? It was a weird moment. I hated the way it played out. I just really hated the way that beat played. And that's one of the biggest moments that really tarnishes my taste for this movie. Granted, if you walk into that scene, you're not gonna understand what's happening, but she could have at least not gone to the worst case scenario for her grandmother that she's been living with, and she's actually taking the side of this guy she met maybe a week ago. I wish instead of throwing everything else out that was in this movie, like they sold us that they were gonna give us this love story and Corey as the shape. Fine, let's have a payoff moment for this plot that we're spending so much time on, but we don't have a final confrontation with Corey and Allison, and I felt like that's what this movie needed. I wish Allison and Corey had their own matchup and final battle of sorts. It would have been interesting if it would have mirrored Lori and Michael's final battle in the kitchen. Felt like that would have been a much more interesting aspect instead of Corey just being killed off so easily, Allison coming in and then leaving, and then Lori having that final battle with Michael. I really wish Allison had this big realization moment of understanding that Corey isn't what he says he is, and I kind of wish that she had her own sort of moment with Corey, because Corey could have essentially have been Allison's boogeyman while Michael is Lori's, and we could have had a mirrored final battle between the two pairs, making it more heroic and a really great final conclusion to both the Halloween 1978 plotline and this new trilogy. And I just wish that Allison had more to do in the final act. Even whenever it came to battling Michael, I wish there was something more for her to do instead of just breaking his arm. I felt like she could have essentially helped Lori in that aspect of getting Michael pinned down and literally crucifixed by butcher knives to the kitchen table. Like, oh my gosh, that was cool in this movie. I love Allison as a character in this trilogy of films, and I know I'm kind of complaining about the lack thereof of a conclusion and a final cap on Allison's arc. The final battle is cool. You just knew whenever Lori looked at the back door and it was open, that's when we saw the same Laurie Strode we saw from 1978, and she's processed a lot of the trauma she went through in 1978 and 2018, but now she's not ready for Michael. And I feel like that gives her the upper hand because she doesn't have the house of booby traps. She doesn't have anyone there with her. No one really knows that Michael is back the way Laurie was able to be over Michael Michael and take off the mask and just be like, I'm done with you. I am done. We are done with this. And then they literally do this whole procession with the entire town of Haddonfield. We get a cameo again from the woman that survived Halloween Kills. And then we also saw a cameo from Julian. He was the kid that was babysat in the 2018 film. I wish we got to see more of his character as well in this movie. That's also another thing. I just wish that he was played more in this movie. I felt like his character could have had a really interesting plot point whenever we see the whole town just gather, and then we get to see Michael grind it up like hamburger meat. And it's kind of funny because we now know there's no way they can pull a resurrection on this movie. The Michael Myers human being is now dead. I really want to know where his mask went. Did they just get rid of it? Did they keep it locked up somewhere? Does Laurie have it? This final moment with the entire town of Haddonfield makes me upset because this is what I wanted this movie to be. And I wanted to see these character moments for people like Lindsay Wallace, like Frank Hawkins, that literally had a plot line in Halloween Kills where we went back to Halloween 1978 to build up on his plot just for nothing to really happen for him and Michael and their sort of relationship in this movie. Because what I thought the other two movies were setting up was this whole relationship of Haddonfield with Michael Myers instead of just Laurie Strode's relationship with Michael. Another positive I really do want to note about this, John Carpenter and his team's score is phenomenal. I really like the vibe and the tone with the score of this final film. Is it my favorite of this new trilogy? Absolutely not. I will say my favorite songs out of this entire trilogy has to be Title from Halloween Kills, where we get that wordless choir. I just really love the vibes and the tone we get with that main title sequence. I also really love the theme of The Shape Hunts Allison, where we kind of pay homage to Laurie Strode in 1978, but now it's Allison running through the neighborhoods of Haddonfield. I think relying on a new plot to end this series is a bold choice, but they needed to execute the remainder of the stuff that they had already set in place with this line of movies. I just really need to watch this trilogy. I really feel like Halloween Ends is where the movie really just drops the ball in terms of the energy, because we start Halloween 2018, we're 40 years fresh from 1978, and now we're seeing Laurie Strode and Michael in two very different spots than where they were on Halloween night 1978. And I really like how we gradually get to see that progression again now 40 years later, and then we just keep on getting more and more energy. We get to the final act, we have all these Strode women, and we're really ending it off on 100. We have Michael Myers now trapped in a basement. We think he's about to get incinerated, much like he did in 1981's Halloween 2. And I thought Halloween 2018 was such a fresh start to the franchise. This is a controversial opinion. 2018 is actually my favorite film in the entire franchise, and that is because it was my first Halloween movie I was able to experience in the movie theater. It had a lot of effect on me emotionally, and I felt like I was really in depth with the story. It made me care about Laurie Strode and her entire family. Like, I really cared about what these women were going through, these strong, powerful women. The Dr. Sartain plot sucked. I will say that plot sucked. And then we had an epic final battle with Laurie and all three Strode women. And in a sense, Halloween 2018 can be watched independently. You can literally just end the movie and go on about your life, because essentially we end the movie with Laurie still alive. She's wounded, but she's still alive, and Michael is essentially dead in the basement. So, and that's what makes 2018 so great, because you just have to have some sort of general knowledge of the 1978 film to get what's taking place in this film. Now, that can't really be said about Halloween Kills, because it does bring in a lot of legacy characters, but Halloween Kills does successfully take the level of energy that's at 100 already with 2018, because Halloween Kills starts immediately after the point of Halloween 2018, and then it takes the energy so much higher. We get to see the town of Haddonfield react to these now new murders. Michael Myers is on the loose. He is the most brutal. The stakes are higher. Legacy characters are dying off. We're returning to the Myers house, and one of the reasons why Halloween Kills is starting to become more and more one of my favorite films in this franchise. I really think it's a great sequel to Halloween 2018 now, like kind of looking back at it in perspective. So we end Halloween Kills with the whole mob getting just brutally taken out by Michael Myers, and then we get kind of a homage to Psycho at the very end with the death of Karen. And so now our energy is now at 400. We are off the charts, insane at this point. Now we open Halloween Ends with Halloween Night 2019. Corey Cunningham is babysitting this kid, and then we have this accidental and brutal death that just, you will just have to watch the moment in the movie. But oh my gosh, that moment was one of the most shocking things I think I've ever seen in my life. Essentially at that point, what I'm perceiving this trilogy now is that no one is safe. Legit, no one is safe. The kids aren't safe. The adults aren't safe. Laurie Strode isn't safe. No one is safe from the shape and the effects of Michael Myers. And I was really excited for the remainder of what this plotline was going to go down and the energy this film would take the other two movies. The way Halloween Ends feels so out of line with the other two movies is the reason why I don't like this movie. I'm okay with the Corey Cunningham and Allison Nelson sort of coming of age type of vibe, but let's not make that the final chapter of this trilogy with a bunch of, and it didn't even have to involve Michael, just bigger character moments for some more of these figures we've been following for this entire new series of films. And that's why Halloween Ends drops the ball in that sort of sense. And then I also want to touch base on the radio tower aspect. I thought that was really cool. We had it hinted a little bit in the previous film, but now it's on full display. Music is really integrated a lot more into this film, and I really love that aspect. I like the more grungy sort of a vibe of the movie. It really just feels like a whole new vibe and tone. Plot is the main issue I have with this film, not so much really anything else. The way it's just so ostracized from Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills. Halloween Ends is sort of that missing puzzle piece that's sort of, it's fitting in the spot, but it's just not the right piece to go into that spot. And that's how I would describe the movie. Don't know how much my opinion will change on this movie over time. I could end up loving this film and it become one of my favorite films because there are a lot of great moments I do love. It just didn't hit all the marks that I was wishing it would hit. It doesn't feel like the perfect cap on to this trilogy that I was really wanting and hoping that I was going to get to see, because I felt I really loved these characters that we were introduced, because it kind of fed into a new Halloween lore and I was really interested in it. But instead, and you know, the Haddonfield stuff is cool too, but I wish that that plot got a more end cap on it like we did with Laurie Strode, because we got that sort of H2O, okay, Laurie kills Michael, Michael is done, so we got that. As of right now, my preferred Halloween marathon is Halloween 1978, Halloween 2 1981, and Halloween 20 years later. I just feel like those three movies string together so perfectly. They get me in the right mood for Halloween. 2018 and Halloween Kills still do the same for me. I can't enjoy Halloween Kills with the cliffhanger ending, knowing the way that this whole story ends in the next film. I love the entire Halloween franchise. For better or for worse, there are some really cheesy sequels in this franchise. Yes, I do love the Thor movies. I really think Danielle Harris does deserve a big comeback moment with the Jamie Lloyd character in the future. I really hope we do see more films featuring Michael Myers, but maybe in different timelines. And if there's a specific Halloween movie you want me to talk about more in depth, let me know in the comments down below. But that's all I really have to say about Halloween Ends. If you are new to this channel, make sure you give that subscribe button a little tap, and make sure to follow me on all my social medias at TyTyWhitehead. I will see you guys in another video.